As the afternoon drew to a close, and the evening soon approached, a royal carriage arrived at the entry of the courtyard to bring them to Kenidak for the festival. But it did not take long for the three of them to agree that they would much prefer to walk there, as they had done many years ago. This was a bit shocking for the coachman, that three such distinguished princes would prefer to walk. But they would not be discouraged. When at last they reached Kenidak, they found the streets to be crowded with men and women bustling about to and fro between merchants' carriages, little shops, and crooked tabletops covered with trinkets of all sorts. Though not presenting themselves as royalty, due to the fact that they did not wear the crowns or their royal emblems on their shoulders, the princes were recognized by the townspeople. That is, Marcus and Adakis were. But Salvador was a stranger to his own people, yet still, passerbys regarded him as a man of great importance, based on his expensive clothing and his authoritative manner. And although any of the three princes could have had anything that they desired at the simple clapping of their hands, each of them carried a pouch full of coins at their side. The coins were known as perot. The perot had a decent value, and were somewhat desirable, but to carry a pouch full of perot was a sign of considerable wealth, and to purchase an item rather than demanding it gave the princes a satisfaction of supporting the merchants' business. The tabletops scattered around the marketplace were covered with every possible and imaginable thing, from mismatched dining cutlery to fine-looking pieces of artwork. Pieces of clothing or armor, menacingly carved daggers, and mystic-looking scrolls could be found amid the clutter and mixture of strange-looking tools. On one table, Adakis spotted a vortam board, missing quite a few pieces though. He was reminded of the many games he and Salvador had played as children, and he wondered if Salvador had missed those days as much as he did. As they rummaged through the marketplace, they found many things that could only be described as rubbish. But occasionally, it was possible to find a treasure beneath the refuse. It was quite possible, however, that many of these objects were stolen. The Favian woods to the west were well known for sheltering not only the Dark Lord's exiles, and also the Favians, but the gypsies, who traveled through the villages across the Great Island. But gypsies were not the only thieves well known to the Northern Isles, as many men had fled the seas in hope of escaping punishment after facing convictions for their offenses. These men fleeing to the sea had gained a reputation of piracy, and the southern waters were a dangerous region for any honest sailor. Here at the festival, many of these pirates and gypsies had gathered their stolen belongings to sell in the marketplace. Despite much of the merchandise probably being stolen, there were fascinating things to be seen. Adakis noticed that at one of the cluttered tables, Salvador had found a long dagger with a golden hilt. The gold hilt had an expensive gleam to it, and the blade was narrow and sharp to a point. It was a weapon worthy of a menacing man, and Adakis was slightly disturbed as he watched Salvador pay the man before sliding it into the brim of his boot, where it would not be noticed. However, his fear of the dagger vanished when he remembered the stately weapon that Marcus had not parted with, since he had received it from the men of honor many years ago. It was the silver axe, the weapon which the goddess had presented to his father during the war against the Favians, when he was named the Guardian. Wielding his father's silver battle axe in his arms, Marcus was a menacing rival to any man. The axe stood about shoulder height with Marcus, the sturdy handle fitting into his grip as though it had been his destiny to wield it. Adakis suddenly found himself desiring to also arm himself with an impressive weapon, and found a man leaned against the side of a wagon, beside a table of weaponry. The hood of his cloak was pulled over his head, and the shadow prevented Adakis from seeing any of the features of the man's face. But in front of the man, resting across the tabletops, were several stately swords with impressive hilts and thick blades. Adakis looked over each one of them carefully. Each one was well crafted, and had traits that made them each unique. But as the man watched Adakis closely examining the fine swords, he chuckled to himself. He watched as the stranger motioned his hand across the table, telling Adakis that these were trinkets, and that there was nothing impressive about them. But if he wanted to see a blade that was worthy of a second glance, he would gladly show it to him. Intrigued, Adakis asked to see the sword that the man referred to. Lifting his chin to reveal the satisfied smirk on his face, the stranger flicked away the edge of his cloak and revealed a scabbard beneath. Adakis watched in fascination as the man drew the sword out of the sheath and swung it out before him. The threaded bronze grip formed elegantly around the man's wrist, the bronze ending at the hilt before sharpening out into a narrow, black-tinted blade. The sword had a weightless appearance, as the man twisted his wrist and swiped the air in front of him, and a deep indented design in the black blade was lined with the same bronze as was found at the hilt. Adakis was speechless at the sight of this beautifully crafted weapon. Taking a step forward to admire it, he asked the man where it had come from. The man smirked, stating that he had made it himself. It was truly beautiful, and he could imagine his companions' faces as he rejoined them with such a sword hanging from his belt. Seeing that Adakis had an interest in the sword, the man balanced it between his hands as he stated that he would be willing to sell it. That is, if the price was right. Obviously, the man did not realize that Adakis was a prince of Callister, and thus had a considerable amount of Perot to carry with him. But Adakis kept his title a secret, and asked the man how much he would want for the sword. Adakis was pleased to find that the stranger asked very little for it, and was amused to see the shock on the man's face as Adakis produced the amount that the man had asked for. Seemingly overjoyed, the man accepted the payment and handed the sword over to Adakis. Adakis thanked the merchant and attached the sheath and sword to his belt. The sword was a bit heavy, weighing down the left side of his belt, but Adakis could not have been more pleased as he sauntered with a slight hobble in his step to where Marcus and Salvador stood. They immediately noticed and asked about the sword on his side, and Adakis was proud to show it to them. Satisfied to see the wonder in their faces at the sight of this bronze and black sword, he slid it back into the sheath and urged that they continue through the marketplace.